We are living in an age of unprecedented access to pleasure. You can order anything to your door within hours. You can stream infinite entertainment. You can connect with thousands of people instantly. You can curate an experience of your life that is almost entirely free from discomfort, from boredom, from friction. And yet you are not happy. You're not happy, and this fact alone should terrify you. Because you have been given everything that previous generations would have considered impossible. You have been given the elimination of suffering. And somehow, that elimination has not brought you peace. It has brought you anxiety. It has brought you emptiness. It has brought you a kind of existential dread that no amount of additional pleasure seems capable of touching. What if I told you that this was the plan all along? What if I told you that the happiness you're chasing is not actually the goal, but the means to something far more sinister than anyone wants to admit? What if the endless pursuit of happiness is not a path to freedom, but a sophisticated system of control designed to keep you docile, compliant, and powerless? Aldous Huxley saw this coming. He saw it in 1931 when he wrote Brave New World. He imagined a future where people would not be controlled through oppression, but through pleasure. Not through force, but through the satisfaction of desire. A world where people would be so distracted by their own happiness that they would never notice they were enslaved. And when Huxley looked at the world decades later, he saw his predictions coming true faster than he expected. Not through some external conspiracy, but through the willing participation of everyone, through our collective agreement that happiness is the highest good, that suffering must be eliminated, that discomfort is something to be avoided at all costs. But what if that agreement is destroying the very thing that makes us human? What if the pursuit of happiness is the one thing guaranteed to make you miserable? What if the elimination of suffering has eliminated the possibility of meaning, growth, and becoming? This is not self-help. This is not motivational. This is a warning. And if you pay attention, it might just save your life. So clear your mind. Prepare yourself. Because what you're about to learn will make you question everything you've been told about what you should be pursuing. There is a fundamental paradox that almost nobody understands. The more directly you pursue happiness, the more it eludes you. The more you organize your life around the goal of being happy, the more unhappy you become. This is not a poetic observation. This is a psychological fact. And the reason it's true reveals something crucial about the nature of happiness itself. Happiness is not something you can catch. It's not something you can acquire. It's something that emerges as a byproduct of other pursuits. It's a shadow cast by a life being lived in alignment with something larger than yourself. But modern culture has convinced you that happiness is the thing to pursue directly, that you should organize your life around maximizing pleasant experiences and minimizing unpleasant ones, that the goal is to feel good as much as possible. And the moment you start organizing your life around that goal, you're already lost, because you've confused the shadow with the object. You're chasing the shadow while the object moves further away. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi spent decades researching the actual conditions under which people experience deep satisfaction and well-being, and what he found contradicted almost everything modern culture teaches about happiness. He found that people experience their greatest sense of fulfillment not when they're seeking pleasure, but when they're completely absorbed in a challenging task that's slightly beyond their current capability. He called this state flow. And flow is not achieved by seeking happiness. Flow is achieved by seeking challenge, by seeking growth, by seeking to develop mastery in something that matters. Happiness in these moments is not the goal. It's the byproduct. It's what happens when you're so focused on the task that you forget to evaluate whether you're happy. And that forgetting, that complete absorption, is the actual source of the satisfaction. The moment you start evaluating how happy you are, the moment you break your focus to assess whether you're experiencing the right amount of pleasure, flow disappears. And with it, the satisfaction disappears. You're left with the deliberate pursuit of happiness, which is a fundamentally different and fundamentally empty experience. Consider something as simple as eating. If you approach eating with the goal of maximizing pleasure, what happens? You taste the food mindfully. You savor each bite. You seek out the most pleasurable flavors. And initially, this is nice. But what inevitably happens is that the pleasure diminishes. Your palate adapts. The flavors that were exciting become mundane. You need more intense stimulation to achieve the same level of pleasure. You need to add more salt, more sugar, more fat. And what started as a rich sensory experience becomes a kind of compulsive chasing of increasingly diminished returns. Now compare this to eating with the goal of nourishing yourself, of sharing a meal with someone you care about, of experiencing food as part of a ritual or a culture. In these contexts, pleasure is present, but it's not the focus. And somehow, the pleasure is more satisfying precisely because it's not being desperately chased. This is not poetic, this is neurological. Your nervous system can detect desperation. It can detect the difference between pleasure that emerges naturally from engagement and pleasure that's being anxiously extracted. And when it detects that desperation, it actually produces the opposite response. Anxiety, emptiness, a sense that something is missing. So you chase harder, you consume more, you seek more intense experiences, and the more you chase, the less satisfied you become. Welcome to modern life. Welcome to the tyranny of happiness. What makes this particularly insidious is that you've been conditioned to blame yourself for your unhappiness in this system. If you're not happy while pursuing happiness, the narrative says it's because you're not trying hard enough, you haven't found the right therapy, you haven't tried the right supplements, you haven't purchased the right product, you haven't curated your life correctly. The system itself is never questioned. The goal of pursuing happiness is never questioned. Your failure to achieve it is always the problem. So you try harder, you optimize more, you consume more self-help, you upgrade your life, you change your diet, your exercise routine, your meditation practice, your career. You do everything right, and you're still not happy because the goal itself is the problem. The goal of being happy is the one thing preventing you from achieving the state of absorption, engagement, and meaning that actually produces genuine well-being. You're running in a hamster wheel designed to keep you running forever, all in the service of a goal that recedes faster the closer you get to it. Aldous Huxley was not just a novelist, he was a social critic with a terrifying ability to see into the future. And what he saw was that the greatest threat to human freedom was not oppression, but seduction. Not being forced into compliance, but being pleasured into it. In Brave New World, Huxley imagined a society where suffering had been eliminated, where people had access to unlimited pleasure, where technology and chemistry conspired to make sure that everyone was happy all the time. And on the surface, this sounds wonderful. But Huxley understood something crucial. In such a world, freedom becomes impossible, because the moment you're comfortable, the moment your needs are met, the moment you're experiencing constant low-level pleasure, you have no motivation to change anything. You have no motivation to question. You have no motivation to resist. You become perfectly content in a cage, as long as the cage is comfortable enough. You become the perfect citizen, docile, compliant, consuming, perfectly happy, and completely powerless. Huxley's warning was not about some dystopian government forcing happiness on an unwilling population. It was about people voluntarily choosing pleasure over freedom, choosing comfort over authenticity, choosing the elimination of suffering over the pursuit of meaning. And what's remarkable is how accurate his prediction has become. We now live in a world where the elimination of discomfort is treated as the highest moral good, where children are shielded from failure, where adults are encouraged to optimize their lives to minimize friction, where technology is deliberately designed to provide constant micro-hits of pleasure to keep you engaged and passive. We've created precisely what Huxley warned about, a society of perfectly contented slaves, and we did it not through force, but through giving people what they said they wanted: happiness. The systems of pleasure are so sophisticated now that they operate on levels you're not even aware of. Algorithms learn what content makes you feel good and feed you more of it. You're not bored for a single moment because entertainment is infinitely available. Conversation is never uncomfortable because you can immediately switch to talking to someone who agrees with you. Loneliness is never felt because you have connection available on demand. And in a world where all suffering has been engineered out, something else happens. Growth stops, challenge stops, meaning stops. Because meaning requires friction. Meaning requires the possibility of failure. Meaning requires that something matters enough that losing it would hurt. Meaning requires that you're pursuing something larger than your own comfort. But in a society organized around the elimination of discomfort, meaning becomes almost impossible to access. You can have pleasure. You can have entertainment. You can have distraction. You can have the feeling of being connected to thousands of people. But you can't have meaning. You can't have the deep satisfaction that comes from having struggled with something and overcome it. You can't have the sense of purpose that comes from serving something larger than yourself. You can't have the genuine growth that comes from being challenged beyond your current capability, because all of those things require discomfort. All of those things require the possibility of failure and suffering. And we've decided collectively that suffering is the enemy. So we've engineered it out. And in doing so, we've engineered out the very possibility of becoming fully human. What Huxley understood is that you cannot have meaning without the possibility of meaninglessness. You cannot have joy without the possibility of sorrow. You cannot have connection without the possibility of loneliness. You cannot have growth without the possibility of failure. These opposites are not bugs in the system, they're features. They're what make the positive states actually matter. But when we try to eliminate one side of the polarity, to have happiness without sadness, pleasure without pain, comfort without struggle, we don't actually get what we think we get. We get a kind of flatness, a kind of numbness, a kind of existential emptiness masquerading as well-being. We get exactly what Huxley predicted. A world of people who are perfectly happy and completely devoid of meaning. And the tragedy is that most people don't even realize it's happening to them. Most people still believe they're pursuing happiness. Most people still believe the constant pleasure they're consuming is leading them somewhere. But it's not. It's leading them in circles, round and round the hamster wheel, faster and faster, getting nowhere and completely content the entire time. There's a psychological mechanism called hedonic adaptation. It means that no matter what happens in your life, positive or negative, you tend to return to a baseline level of happiness within a relatively short period of time. You get the job you've been dreaming about. You're happy for a few months, then you adapt. You get used to it. It becomes your new normal and you're no longer happy. You get the car you wanted. You're thrilled for weeks. Then you adapt, it becomes normal, and you're looking at the next car. You achieve the goal you've been pursuing for years. You experience satisfaction for a moment, then you adapt, and you're immediately looking for the next goal. This is not a flaw in human nature. This is a feature. It's designed to keep you striving, to keep you growing, to keep you reaching for something beyond your current state. But when you've organized your entire life around the pursuit of happiness, when you've made happiness the goal rather than a byproduct, hedonic adaptation becomes a trap because you're constantly chasing something that the moment you catch it stops being what you thought it was. Philosopher Albert Camus understood this trap deeply. He talked about the absurd, the fundamental contradiction between human desire for meaning and the meaninglessness of existence. And he understood that people respond to this absurdity in different ways. Some people deny it and pretend meaning exists. Some people escape into distraction. Some people recognize the absurdity and choose to live anyway, fully aware that meaning is something they create, not something they discover. But what Camus really understood is that the pursuit of happiness as an escape from absurdity is just another form of denial. It's another way of refusing to acknowledge that meaning is not something you arrive at. It's something you create through your choices and your commitments. And the moment you start believing that happiness is a destination you can reach, you've already lost the thread of meaning. You're operating in the realm of fantasy. You're believing in something that fundamentally cannot exist, a permanent state of arrival. But that's exactly what modern culture promises. That's exactly what the self-help industry sells. The idea that if you just do the right things, optimize the right areas, you'll finally reach a state of perpetual happiness. You'll finally be done. You'll finally be satisfied. You'll finally be able to relax. And everything you're struggling with now is just temporary. It's just until you reach that state. It's just until you arrive. The cruelty of this promise is that it ensures you'll never actually be satisfied in the present moment. Because you're always oriented toward the future. You're always looking forward to the time when you'll be happy. The time when you'll have enough. The time when you'll be enough. So you sacrifice the present moment, the only moment you actually have, for a hypothetical future that will never come. Because the moment you reach it, the moment you get what you thought you wanted, your nervous system adapts, and you're looking forward again. You're pursuing the next level. You're optimizing the next area. You're trying to reach the next destination. And the present moment, the only place where actual life is happening, is constantly passed over. It's constantly deferred. You spend your entire life waiting to be happy, and then you die, and you never actually arrive. That's what awaits people who organize their lives around the pursuit of happiness. Not unhappiness necessarily, but a kind of chronic dissatisfaction, a constant sense that something is missing, a perpetual reaching for something that the moment you touch it turns to dust. What makes this particularly tragic is that you cannot actually will yourself into happiness. You cannot think yourself into it. You cannot force yourself into it through effort. The harder you try to make yourself happy, the more you activate the parts of your brain associated with discrepancy monitoring, the parts that scan for the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And what those parts do is generate anxiety. They generate the sense that something is wrong. They generate the very opposite of what you're trying to create, so you feel anxious about not being happy, which makes you less happy, which makes you more anxious about not being happy. You're caught in a feedback loop, and the only way out is to do something completely counterintuitive. You have to stop trying. You have to stop pursuing happiness directly. You have to redirect your attention towards something else entirely. You have to find something worth doing that's independent of whether it makes you happy. And the moment you do that, the moment you let go of the goal of being happy and focus instead on something that matters, happiness often shows up as a byproduct. But it shows up quietly. It shows up without fanfare. It doesn't feel like the monumental, life-changing happiness that you thought you were pursuing. It feels like something much more subtle, something much more real, something that actually lasts. If this is starting to make sense to you, if you're beginning to see the cage you've been running in, then you need to hit subscribe. Because what I'm about to share is not how to be happy. It's not another self-help strategy. It's how to build a life that's worth living, regardless of whether it makes you happy. And that's the only path to actual peace. There's a contemporary German philosopher named Byung-Chul Han who argues that we're living in what he calls the age of burnout. But burnout, he argues, is not actually caused by too much work. Burnout is caused by too much freedom, too much choice, too much responsibility placed on individuals to optimize and improve themselves without external constraints. In simpler societies, in societies with more rigid structures, people at least had a clear external enemy. They had clear opposition to overcome. They had clear meaning embedded in their roles and their communities. But in modern free societies, we have none of these things. We have infinite choice. We have infinite freedom, and we're supposed to use that freedom to create meaning for ourselves, but creating meaning is hard, and so instead, most people outsource the creation of meaning to systems designed to consume their attention and energy. They pursue happiness through consumption. They pursue purpose through distraction. And underneath all of this, there's a profound emptiness, because happiness, real happiness, requires meaning. And meaning cannot be purchased. Meaning cannot be outsourced. Meaning requires that you struggle with something, that you commit to something, that you sacrifice something, and sacrifice requires the existence of something worth sacrificing for. But in a world organized around the elimination of discomfort, sacrifice becomes almost impossible because sacrifice means choosing the harder thing. Sacrifice means choosing delayed gratification. Sacrifice means choosing to do something that's difficult today because it will produce something meaningful tomorrow. But the systems that surround you are designed to eliminate the need for sacrifice. They're designed to give you everything now: instant gratification, immediate pleasure, no friction, no waiting. And when you never have to wait for anything, when you never have to struggle for anything, when all of your impulses can be satisfied immediately, meaning dies, you can have happiness, you can have pleasure, you can have distraction, but you cannot have meaning, because meaning requires that something matters enough that losing it would hurt. And in a world where pain has been eliminated, nothing really matters. Everything becomes equally disposable. Relationships become as replaceable as apps. Goals become as interchangeable as entertainment options, and your own life becomes just another experience to be optimized for maximum pleasure, with no deeper purpose underneath it. What this produces is a kind of spiritual death. Not in a religious sense, necessarily, but in the sense of losing the deeper orientation that makes life coherent. You're still alive. You're still experiencing things, but you're experiencing them as a disconnected series of moments, each one designed for maximum pleasure. But pleasure without purpose is just numbness, with a different name. It's distraction posing as experience. It's sensation without meaning. And underneath it all, there's a profound despair. Because on some level, you can feel that something is missing, that you're not actually living, that you're just consuming a simulation of living, that you're going through the motions of a life without actually inhabiting a life. And that knowledge, that vague, nagging sense that something is fundamentally wrong, cannot be fixed by more pleasure. It cannot be fixed by better optimization. It cannot be fixed by consuming more experiences. Because the problem is not a deficit of happiness. The problem is an absence of meaning. And you cannot consume meaning. You cannot purchase it. You have to create it. And creating it requires that you do something dangerous. You have to commit to something uncertain. You have to pursue something that might not work out. You have to risk failure. You have to sacrifice comfort. You have to face the possibility of suffering. And in a culture that's taught you to avoid suffering at all costs, that possibility feels impossible. The irony is that the elimination of suffering has not produced a society of happy people. It's produced a society of anxious, depressed, spiritually empty people. It's produced people who feel deeply alone despite being connected to thousands. It's produced people who feel meaningless despite having access to infinite experience. It's produced exactly what Huxley predicted: a perfectly controlled, perfectly compliant population that's content on the surface but hollow underneath. And what's happening now is that people are starting to wake up to this hollowness. People are starting to recognize that the pursuit of happiness is not leading anywhere. People are starting to understand on a gut level that something has been fundamentally lost in the quest to eliminate suffering, and so they're starting to turn to substances, to extreme experiences, to anything that can break through the numbness. They're using drugs not to feel happy, but to feel something. They're engaging in dangerous activities not for pleasure, but for the meaning that danger provides. They're seeking out suffering through extreme sports, through challenging pursuits, through deliberately uncomfortable experiences, because the comfort has become unbearable. They're trying to wake themselves up. And that impulse, that instinct to seek meaning, even at the cost of comfort, is actually the first sign of the soul coming back to life. If happiness is not the goal, if comfort is not the answer, if meaning cannot be purchased, then what is? What's the alternative? How do you build a life that actually matters? The answer is both simple and terrifying. You have to choose something worth suffering for, not suffering for its own sake, not masochism, but a pursuit, a commitment, a goal that's important enough that it justifies the difficulties that come with pursuing it. You have to find something you care about more than your own comfort, more than your own happiness, more than your own ease, and you have to be willing to sacrifice and struggle in service of that thing. That commitment, that willingness to struggle for something larger than yourself, is the actual foundation of a meaningful life. Not happiness, meaning. And meaning is infinitely more sustaining than happiness ever could be. When Viktor Frankl survived the concentration camps, he didn't do it by pursuing happiness. He did it by finding meaning. He found meaning in his observations. He found meaning in his commitment to understanding the human experience. He found meaning in his relationships with other prisoners, and that meaning sustained him through circumstances that were genuinely unbearable. Not by making him happy, but by giving his suffering a context, by giving his struggle a purpose, by connecting his individual struggle to something larger. And what Frankl discovered in those camps is something most people never discover in their lives of comfort. He discovered that meaning is actually more powerful than comfort. That purpose is more sustaining than pleasure. That having something worth dying for is more important than avoiding pain. And the tragedy of modern culture is that we've eliminated the conditions under which people can discover this. We've created a world so comfortable, so distraction-filled, so optimized for pleasure, that we've made it almost impossible for people to find genuine meaning. We've made it impossible to access the knowledge that Frankl had. We've made it impossible to develop the strength that comes from struggling towards something that matters. The path forward is not to reject comfort entirely. It's not to deliberately embrace suffering. It's to deliberately choose pursuits that matter despite the discomfort they require. It's to find something you believe in, whether that's creating something, building something, serving something, or standing for something, and to organize your life around that. Not around your happiness, around that commitment. And the remarkable thing is that when you organize your life around meaning rather than happiness, happiness often shows up, but not as the main event, as a byproduct, as a side effect of a life being lived in alignment with your deepest values. You might struggle, you might face failure, you might experience real difficulty, but underneath it all, there's a coherence. There's a sense that your life is going somewhere, that what you're doing matters, that you're building something, that you're becoming someone, that all of this difficulty is in service of something worth serving. And that sense of purpose, that alignment between your actions and your values, is actually far more sustaining than any amount of engineered pleasure could ever be. The systems of pleasure will try to seduce you away from this path. They'll offer you constant distractions. They'll offer you immediate gratification. They'll offer you the ease of not having to choose, not having to commit, not having to sacrifice. And much of the time, that seduction will work. Much of the time, you'll fall back into the patterns of pleasure-seeking and comfort optimization. That's okay. That's expected. The work is not to be perfect. The work is to keep choosing, to keep recognizing when you've been seduced by comfort, to keep reorienting yourself toward meaning, to keep choosing the harder thing when the harder thing is aligned with your values. This is not a one-time choice, it's a daily practice, and some days you'll fail, some days you'll choose comfort, some days you'll fall back into the patterns, and that's fine. What matters is that you keep choosing. You keep remembering that happiness is not the goal, that comfort is not the point, that your life is supposed to mean something, and that meaning is worth the struggle it requires. Huxley died in 1963, and in the decades since, his predictions have only become more accurate. The systems of pleasure have only become more sophisticated. The engineering of comfort has only become more complete. The elimination of friction from everyday life has only become more total. And the result is exactly what he predicted: a population that's perfectly happy and perfectly powerless. A society where people have everything they think they want and no idea why they're still empty. And the only way out, the only way to reclaim your humanity, to reclaim your agency, to reclaim your life, is to do something radical. You have to reject the goal of happiness. You have to embrace the possibility of suffering. You have to find something worth dedicating your life to, knowing that pursuit will be difficult, knowing that it will require sacrifice, knowing that it will cause you pain, and choosing it anyway, not because it will make you happy, but because it will make your life matter. This is not a message that will be welcomed by the systems that profit from your pursuit of happiness. The self-help industry doesn't want you to know this. The consumer systems don't want you to know this. The platforms that profit from your distraction don't want you to know this. They have invested trillions of dollars in convincing you that happiness is attainable through consumption. That comfort is the goal. That your job is to optimize your life for maximum pleasure. And if you accept that messaging, if you continue pursuing happiness, they've won. They've accomplished what Huxley feared. They've turned you into a willing prisoner, content in your cage, distracted from the fact that you're caged, perfectly happy and completely enslaved. But if you choose differently, if you turn away from the constant seduction of pleasure, if you find something worth struggling for, if you build a life around meaning rather than happiness, then you've escaped, not into some state of perpetual joy, but into something far more precious, into the possibility of becoming fully human, into the possibility of creating something that matters, into the possibility of a life that is worth the struggle it requires. The choice is yours. The systems will continue to offer you comfort. They will continue to optimize for your happiness. They will continue to design experiences that require nothing from you except consumption. And you can accept that offer. You can spend your life in the comfortable cage, pursuing happiness, never quite satisfied, never quite fulfilled. Or you can do something different. You can ask yourself, what do I believe in? What would I be willing to suffer for? What would I be willing to sacrifice comfort to pursue? What kind of person do I want to become? What kind of legacy do I want to leave? And you can organize your life around the answer to those questions, not around happiness, around meaning. And the remarkable thing is that you don't have to know the answers right now. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to start asking the questions. You just have to start turning your attention away from the constant bombardment of pleasure and toward the deeper question of what your life is actually for. And the moment you do that, the moment you reject the premise that happiness is the highest good and start asking what actually matters, you've already begun the work of genuine liberation. Huxley wrote Brave New World as a warning. He wanted us to see the danger before it was too late, before we had engineered away our own agency, before we had eliminated the conditions for meaning. And we didn't listen. We built the world he warned about. But it's not too late. The choice is still available. The possibility of meaning is still there. The capacity to struggle towards something worth struggling for is still present. But it requires that you wake up, that you see the cage you're in, that you see the systems of pleasure that are designed to keep you compliant, and that you choose something different, not because it will make you happy, but because it will make your life matter. And that is the real invitation. That is the real path forward. I'll see you in the next video. And I hope by then, you'll have had the courage to ask yourself what you're actually willing to struggle for.